New growth opportunities for businesses online as a landmark digital trade deal between Singapore and the UK comes into force.
So what will all these mean? We're going to put that question to Associate Professor Goh Puay Guan from the Department of Analytics and Operations at the NUS Business School. Well, Professor, what does the agreement mean for businesses here?
Well, thanks for having me. I think there is a good development that helps Singapore to get more new business opportunities in digitalization and the new economy. And, I think of this as similar to what we did in the early 1990s and 2000s with the free trade agreements and then later on the regional trade partnerships. So basically, the digital agreements will actually help us to plug into new opportunities in fintech, cybersecurity, and e-commerce and digital trade. And of course, on digital trade is also linked to the physical supply chain and payments. So within the supply chain itself, there are many parties that are integrated together, working together to transfer paper documents like bills of ladings and trade documents and finance documents and invoices. So having electronic means to share these documents will also reduce the transaction costs and speed up the information processing between all these different parties.
Professor Goh, now this deal with the UK is not the first. We've had Australia, that one coming into force 2020, Chile and New Zealand 2021. Now, each time Singapore signs such a deal with one country or several countries, what it does is it makes consistent, it regulates rules and frameworks amongst these countries. Now, Singapore signs up now 4, right? This latest one. Each time it's consistent with that group of countries. Is this not a problem with UK now? Well, maybe the regulations and frameworks for the one with Chile and New Zealand is a different one. Now we have to make sure we are consistent with the UK. Is that a problem? Or do we build progressively on frameworks that we developed from earlier agreements?
Sure. Well, it's always not. Ideally, of course, everybody gets together and puts it together, right? But in actual fact, because of different regulatory constraints and sort of different government priorities, it is not always easy to do all the agreements at the same time. So if you look at for example, the FTA approach, it started with a lot of bilateral FTAs, and this was the case for many countries as well, finding points of agreement, and then before it moves into regional trade agreements. So we can also think of, these digital trade agreements as pretty similar in that respect, getting, the sort of agreements in place. And then from there to actually expand further, with integration. And of course, if you look at information integration itself, it's actually it's actually a matter of, ensuring that there's interoperability between different standards. So in that sense, it could be actually more transferable, right? Because you can have different standards between different trade agreements, even between different countries, and that's fine. But you just need to make sure that these sort of digital standards are able to intercommunicate and interoperate with each other.
Well, so Prof, what do these businesses need to do now, and do you think it's going to be difficult for the smaller ones?
Well, I think it's always not easy for small businesses to start off in the first place, right? In terms of expanding overseas because of different constraints that they have on resources and manpower. Of course, if you look at this agreement itself, there are some areas in the agreement where I see that SMEs are specifically being targeted, and this could include for example the use of e-commerce, open government information that allows them to have open access. And also digitalization of trade document to encourage, not just a reducing of costs, but also to increase the participation by the SMEs. As to whether the businesses, can, what they can do, right? I think is a matter of, different levels of readiness. But in the last, certainly in the last 2 years, we do see that, businesses are spending, more time and effort to digitalize, and really it's been driven by COVID. So this is just, in a way, creating that platform for companies to be able to expand further based on a shared framework.
Professor, in principle, of course, there should be a lot of gain for all parties. But in most things like these, the change can be difficult and also costly in the short term. For businesses that want to benefit from this kind of agreement, what do they have to do no matter how painful it might be at this point?
Sure. I think a lot of it has got to do with, if you look at sort of a digital transformation itself, right, it starts with maybe looking at the low-hanging fruits. And the low-hanging fruits, from the point of view of this digital agreement, right, could be, looking at, the sharing of trade information and sharing of, trade documents in the supply chain, because by sharing information, you can actually reduce transaction costs and speed up efficiency of the processing. So once you have that cost benefit, and companies have already started doing pilots on this, right? Both internationally as well as in Singapore. So, for example, in Singapore, you had SG TradeX, which was launched recently, and that's basically a sort of a supply chain, information sharing consortium that is based on our companies that are based here. So pilot projects like this actually can show the cost benefit, and therefore then it allows companies to see the benefit and invest further. Then of course the next step would be looking at how then do we transform further. But certainly the low-hanging fruit would be how do we use this to maybe reduce costs and increase our efficiency.
Yeah.
And along the way, possibly looking at new business opportunities. So, for example, talking about e-commerce, talking about being able to expand into the UK market, right, and for UK companies to come into Singapore, vice versa. So there could be opportunities like this because we are talking about sort of in this case digital trade barriers being removed as well.
Okay, many thanks for speaking with us, Associate Professor Goh Puay Guan there from the NUS Business School.